It woke from the place in which it slept, an alien waking up in an alien base. It had been sleeping for a very long time. As a matter of fact, it had slept for so long that the planet in which they resided in looked completely different. It was another world, and sadly enough, a world that was already taken by another species called humans. These creatures were not as technologically advanced as this alien was. So, the alien grew curious of this newfound species. This new species luckily hadn't found the base in which this alien resided in. Hence, the security protocols worked. One thing became very clear to this alien, named the Nature Guardian, that it would have to decide if this new species was worth the life they were given. Though this was a tricky question because of the different cultures they had, it couldn't rely on its technology to figure this out, so it decided to spy on some of the humans to see what their behavior was like. So it did just that. It put on its gear and opened the hatch for the first time in 1,000,000 years or more. When it looked outside for the first time, it saw nature, trees and bushes everywhere. So it walked down a path to see the new world. It saw all kinds of creatures that it had never seen before. However, these creatures were not very strong, to say the very least. Put them next to one of the creatures millions of years back, and they'd look like miners. Once that thought passed the alien decided to keep on walking down a path, and then, out of nowhere, bumped into a street. As it looked down at the streets, it instantly figured out what it was for. It had learnt that these humans knew transportation. It decided to stay hidden behind the bushes as it followed the street down to the park. It decided to check this park out, but before it did that, it instantly dashed to the bushes again, as it saw a teen walking to one of the swings to take a seat. Then after that, sitting at the flowers. She seemed to be very comfortable, knowing that no one was there to bother her. She seemed exhausted, as if humans had sucked the life out of her one too many times. But as she lay down on the flowers, she went back up and seemed to be very tense, or worried about something. We are now seeing what happened to Amaya during all this time. She stood at the train station, waiting for her train to arrive, but unfortunately for her, she was going to have to wait for her train for a good while, because for some reason her train was delayed to hell. She couldn't believe it. She was too tired after a hard day at college. She decided to go to the park to take a seat at one of the swings. It would be a great way of spending time. But as she sat there, she took a minute to remind herself that it was summer and she could just lay down at the flowers. So she did that. No one was around to bother her anyways, so she sat by the flowers thinking about life. She mostly sat there thinking about if she made the right choice of picking suing as a career choice. She thought of it as a good start anyways. She began to hear a van nearby. When she went back up, she saw that there were 4 men looking at her and checking their surroundings. This couldn't be good. They looked super dangerous, so she decided to try and dash for it. But alas, it was too late. She got grabbed by one of the men as she cried for help. But after he was pushing her, the other men told him to let go and run. What the hell was that all about? They seemed to be afraid of something behind her. She looked behind herself and what she saw was unlike anything she had seen before. She saw a big monster. She ran out of there as fast as possible after that. She couldn't unsee what she saw. It wasn't scary, but it was clearly a threat. She thinks. She ran to the train station and although her train didn't arrive, she went into the train that came before any of the other ones came. She didn't care, she just had to get out of there. Once she arrived in the city, She went to the convenience store and bought a couple of energy drinks to keep herself awake. She wasn't thinking straight at all. She just needed to get at home as quick as possible. She took different buses but eventually arrived back home, where she decided to dash to her bedroom and close her window. She takes a sip from her energy drink and stays awake throughout the whole night. She lives on a farm, which also made matters worse. Once it became the next morning, she decided to try and keep her sanity together and head to the train station. But once she arrived at the train station, she was stopped by a police officer. The police officer had been talking to her dad about what happened at the park, and he wanted to reassure her that everything is alright, and that the officer was willing to go into the forest with her to check on the creature. Amaya was grateful for this, but in the same time, not so much. She knew that the officer probably thought that it was just some animal she was talking about, so she didn't have too much hope. But alas, hope was around at the very least. They both decided that both of them would go into the forest together, so they decided to do just that. So they went back to the park and into the forest and searched. They looked around, but unsurprisingly didn't find a thing. Until Amaya heard the sound of a bear trap go off. Then she noticed the creature stuck on the bear trap. The creature pleaded to her to let it go. She saw the police coming closer. Amaya told the police to stop and did a smooth lie, telling him that it was just a bunny. Then the police officer decided to look elsewhere. Amaya decided to try and help the creature off the bear trap, but she had helped enough with keeping the officer away. Right when she saw the creature off the bear trap, she instantly ran off herself. Of course, this confused the creature, but it decided to walk back to its base nonetheless. The officer asked Amaya where she was going. She told him she was going to school, and the officer offered to drive her there, and Amaya thanked him and left. She dashed into class and told her friend all about it. Her friend, of course, didn't believe it, but was willing to listen to her story after class was over. Once class was finished, Amaya told her everything she had witnessed, and her friend was intrigued to say the very least. So they both agreed to meet up at the park once school was over. Once school was finally finished, she and her friend went into the forest and checked out if they could find it. We are now seeing what happened in the Nature Guardian's perspective. After it had freed itself from the bear trap, it wanted to thank Amaya for her help. But before it could do that, she ran off. This confused the creature because it really didn't know what it did wrong. But it decided to head back to base. It wanted to learn more about the species and to see if it could by any chance get a signal of any other life nearby. So as it went into its base and tried out signals from everywhere, it unfortunately couldn't get any response, showing that either it had a bad signal or that any of its own species weren't alive. It was alone, and had to face it. However, it had seen that one other species of unknown origin was around. It was another group of aliens that it had never seen before. It decided to stay out of it, but keep the planet safe. It sat in its base for a good while, learning more and more about mankind, until it knew fairly enough. However, before it could finish its work, it saw Amaya walking into the forest again with her friend, and the creature saw this as an opportunity to meet her, and start a proper conversation. So it decided to leave base and see if it could start a chat with her. We are now seeing what happens in Amaya's perspective. Amaya and her friend were both walking into the forest. Amaya was worried, but her friend wasn't too afraid. As they kept on walking, it didn't take long until they came across the creature again. Amaya got a huge fright, and so did her friend. Her friend was frozen, but Amaya took a deep breath and said hello. The creature smiled and did whatever it could to calm both Amaya and her friend down. The creature did a great job calming down Amaya, however her friend was still having trouble. Yet this was the perfect time for the creature and Amaya to chat. Amaya first asked a bunch of questions about why it is here. It decided to tell Amaya about how it had awoken in its base after a long time, and Amaya grew fascinated by the very thought of aliens being real. Her friend finally got the courage to ask something, and asked the creature if it had any friends. It responded with a no. It claimed that all of its friends are dead, and it is the last of its kind. It seemed like it was hiding something else, but Amaya didn't want to be rude. Amaya's friend was finally starting to feel comfortable and began chatting away quicker and quicker. Whilst that was going on, Amaya got the idea of showing the creature around, and the creature gave it some thought. But after a while of thinking to itself, it agreed. It had seemed as if the creature could trust Amaya and her friend. It was bizarre how well this was going. She politely said to the creature that she and her friend were gonna leave. They waved goodbye and agreed to meet up tomorrow again so that she and her friend could show it around and teach the creature about the world. The next day. Amaya went back to the playground where they agreed on meeting up. Though right when she went back there, a van drove past her. It was the same van that had those thieves in it. Luckily, it didn't stop for her. It just kept on going, not bothering Amaya. Unfortunately, Amaya's friend was late. She tried calling her, but no answer. Strange. But she semi-forgot about it when she saw the creature coming. As the creature was coming, it changed its appearance to a human's appearance. It was mighty impressive technology that surprised Amaya. Amaya just asked where it wanted to go first, and it kindly asked to go to the town where it could learn more about human ways. And so, they went into the town. It was a small town, which kinda relieved Amaya. It would make it easier for the alien to keep out of conversations. The creature kept on asking a bunch of questions, pointing at stuff and asking for Amaya to explain what it was. It was super peaceful and nice. Amaya had been enjoying every second of it, and she could safely say that the alien was also enjoying it. Once the day finally settled, and Amaya was starting to slowly but surely get exhausted of all of the answered questions, Amaya told the creature that she would be heading home to take a rest. The creature asked if it could come with to see her home, and Amaya said yes. To be asking that too, because her father was working late that day. So they both went back to Amaya's home, and the creature looked around. It also went into Amaya's room to check what Amaya was into. In the room, there was a picture of a celebrity, and a bunch of flowers at her window. And in that window, there was a perfect view of the farm. She had one laptop laying on her desk, and her desk had a ton of flowers on it. Amaya said that yes, she had a flower addiction, in a sarcastic manner. She also had a fair amount of flower shirts and t-shirts that looked very Hawaiian. After a while of the creature looking around Amaya's house, Amaya got a phone call from her friend, and she was in trouble. She got a video call. It was Amaya's friend tied up to a chair, and a sign with the words, "Come and get her," with an address labeled on it. Amaya was panicking hard, and the creature had noticed. The creature felt bad for Amaya's situation and decided to go out and help Amaya's friend. So it went to the location and bashed the door open. The same people who were at the playground, who were going to take Amaya, were there, in this big abandoned warehouse, and in front of the creature was Amaya's friend, tied up. The man with a gun screamed, "Don't move." He was clearly confused and horrified. He panicked and decided to shoot the creature. VR men knew better. They were running away from the warehouse before anything bad could happen to them. The boss was left alone with Amaya's friend, and he got paralyzed by the creature's technological weaponry. The creature untied Amaya's friend and carried her away from the warehouse. The creature went back to Amaya's home and left Amaya's friend on the couch. But then it asked Amaya to come with it to the playground. Amaya, after a while of sitting there with her friend, she agreed. But only if the creature agreed to set down a sentry or something next to her friend, so that her friend would be protected. Amaya knew that it had the technology to do stuff like that, so it did. And they both went to the playground. Amaya asked the creature why it wanted to go to the playground. It wanted to talk about her civilization and what it thought of it. Amaya said to it that she wasn't very old and probably wasn't the best influence. It told Amaya that she did a great job being a teacher, and then went out of its way to point out that its own species wasn't so varied. Its species was almost a copy-paste situation where every creature was the same. There was never crime, but nothing interesting happened. So when it came across mankind, it was relieved in a sense. It loved it here and wanted to somewhat be a part of it. But it knew it couldn't leave its base behind. It needed to be prepared for any survivors of its own. If it had missed any, that is. It told Amaya that if Amaya wasn't there, then it would have killed mankind instantly. But Amaya taught it a lot, and showed that killing mankind would be a very bad idea. Amaya responded to it with a, "You're not wrong when you say mankind is awful, but you've got a some that is great. And that some is worth living for. That's why I'm still alive." This made the creature smile at Amaya. The creature told Amaya that she is the some worth living for. And after that sentence, it stood up and walked into the forest, waving goodbye to Amaya and reassuring her that it would always watch over her. Amaya sat down at the flowers and closed her eyes, knowing that she was loved for being who she was.